Hello and welcome to Kramer Talk K2. Today we're here to talk why ERP is more relevant than it has been in years. I'm Robert Kramer here with Shelly Kramer, both co-hosts in this regular podcast that we're going to do. Shelly, how are we doing today?
We are great. We are great. We probably should say, Robert Kramer, Shelly Kramer, no relation.
Well, we can have fun with it. Maybe we are related, maybe we aren't. So depending on the
We'll
day,
just keep
right?
people guessing.
Yeah. So how are you doing today? You just came from a great trip. You were in Miami. You saw one of the World Cup matches. Lots of ERP happening behind the scenes there. How did it go?
Absolutely. You know what? I was honored to be asked by Commvault to be a judge in they're partnering with Time Inc. to do the first ever CISO of the Year award nomination and designation of one CISO of the Year. And, I'm sure you know this, but Time is well known for doing things like CEO of the Year, CFO of the Year, and all of that. So what's exciting to me, and of course to the folks at Commvault and Time, is that, as you know, I don't know if there's a more important role in business operations these days, and certainly operational resilience, than the CISO role. So it's
Huge.
wonderful to have been a part of, that process. And the team at Commvault couldn't have been better hosts. And they actually took all of us to the Norway v. England game in Miami, the match in Miami.
Wow.
And first time World Cup match attendee here. And quite honestly, I really haven't paid all that much attention to the World Cup in the past. And now I'm a huge fan. So it's been great. It was really
That's
a
all it
wonderful
takes.
experience.
One time, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
so let's jump into ERP. It's been around for a long time, decades. I've been following it for probably 30 plus years. So
Right.
why does it, from your opinion, why does it feel more relevant today than it has in years? Because it sits, right in the middle of all the enterprise, all the priorities, et cetera. So
Right.
what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's really an easy one. And I'm not telling you anything that you don't know, but, rather than being on the periphery, we are now seeing ERP being at the absolute center of enterprise strategy. And it's the foundation of every current priority that happens within an organization. So, as you said, ERP has been around for a very long time, but it's what's riding on top of it now that has changed. You've got AI, you've got automation, you've got supply chain resilience, you've got the ability for real-time decision-making capabilities. And all of these things are top boardroom priorities. And
Yep.
so, and the other part of it is that every one of them fails without connected, trusted data underneath. So,
It's a good point. And I think that companies are going through not necessarily transformation only from an ERP, but an operational transformation.
yeah,
So, how do they link AI, data, security, all the operations into working with ERP correctly, all the ecosystems that they
right.
have? I think it's super important to how the puzzle puts together to how you modernize going down the road from
Yeah,
here. But for a long time, ERP was only considered, the back office. That's why I think
right.
data is at the stage it is now, because we closed the books and then we never really looked at that data.
Yeah.
And then your customer masters, your files, structures, the way that you had your products in, and your everything that you have, your data wasn't used as much as you want it to be done now.
Right.
So how are companies going to adapt to get their data to what you think is going to be used correctly with AI from your perspective?
Well, I think that, the data challenge is without question the biggest challenge that organizations are struggling to get arms around as they work to leverage AI and really kind of get the business benefits that can come from that. And I think that what we've seen, Robert, is that companies have spent years investing in point solutions. And I think in
Yeah.
many ways, ERP was kind of considered by some as one of those point solutions. And, you had a CX platform over here, and you had an analytics tool over there, and you had AI pilots that were somewhere else. And, what companies are now realizing is that all of these investments plateau, if when the underlying transactional backbone is fragmented. So understanding the importance of data, understanding that we need data to be accessible throughout the organization by all of these solutions. And then again, the role that ERP plays in making is in being foundational and making all of that happen is something that people are starting to realize.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that a lot of people might have seen ERP as a you're not as at the pinnacle that it is. The meaning that it is such a major part of an organization. It's the
Yep.
heart of an organization. So where does it go from here? So I think the companies have to modernize. They have to understand what this application or solution means to them at the end of the day. And
Right.
then where does the puzzle fit together, the whole operational plan? Because the goal is how do I grow my business with the same amount of people? Can my
Right.
ERP system do that? And where does AI fit into that? So I think it's the chicken or the egg. Do I get my
Yeah.
data or do I get my AI together or all the above? Or do I work on my operational plan and where do the people fit in to the mix? Because the people are who executes and the people are actually tell me where the gaps are and then what technology I need
Right.
to actually be better because you can't just put stuff the technology into a company without knowing that you need it. And I
Right.
think that's a mistake that companies make.
Yeah,
And
I agree.
also a mistake is that they only use only a portion of the ERP systems and then they're going outside of ERP for something else. And then
Yeah.
they got this whole mix of software that might not be the best solutions for all the companies. I
Yeah.
kind of on a tangent there, but what
Yeah.
do you think?
No, I agree, and I think that, when you stop and think about what's happened over the last handful of years, Robert, it's really no surprise that we've seen sort of an understanding of and an interest in ERP grow. And, think about what we've weathered. We had a global pandemic that I think brought awareness of supply chain and the criticality of supply chain, that maybe, I mean, obviously procurement and supply chain pros were thinking about these things long before a global pandemic, but I think the rest of us, and certainly senior leadership, perhaps weren't thinking about those things until supply chain became an issue. So but you've had a global pandemic. You've had, cargo ship getting stuck, the Ever Given getting stuck in the Suez Canal, right? And that was a huge thing. And I remember having conversations with friends about that, and people who had no idea the impact of that cargo ship being stuck for a significant period of time, how that
Yep.
would impact. But if you were waiting on a refrigerator for your kitchen remodel, or like so many things were sitting on that ship for an extended period of time, and it did impact all of us. And things like you've got, I mentioned the geopolitical shocks and wars and tariff volatility and all of these things. And what has happened and what is happening as a result is that, companies realize that they lack real time visibility across procurement and inventory and logistics. And by the way, all of those capabilities live in ERP.
Yep.
And by the way, visibility that shows you what happened 2 weeks ago is not helpful. Real-time visibility has quickly become what I think are table stakes in organizational resilience today. And you've got to be able to
Good
see
points.
across all of those things in order to do what it is you need to do.
So to do that, you need fabulous data, you need great, personnel, processes, and
Yeah.
then you need a system that's going to be more, system of action versus just a record keeping. And that's where I think we have to move the way that we're used to working to that model because we're not used to that. The companies are, manual in some respect.
Right.
Inventory is, not at the level that controlled where it should be. I always say if there's a sale, there's a reason why. These that something was not done correctly within the companies, that they
Yeah.
produced too much, that they didn't understand what the customers wanted, the
Yeah.
cross sell wasn't coordinated correctly. Even when you go to a store and they're out of something, and it's selling so quick. Well, if you knew that, you should know that, then that you should be making what maybe 10% more than what's going to sell. So then you can sell out or you can sell more, not be not have less than more. Anyway, you have to meet the customer demands correctly. To do
Yeah.
that, you need an active system. But do you kind of getting into some of these other questions that we have? Do you think companies underestimated ERP during the cloud and digital transformation years because we have all these great technologies coming out, and the shiny new red car, they seem more exciting than talking about ERP? Because when
Yeah.
I talk about ERP to people, they look at me like deer in headlights, like I don't even get it. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But ERP is the foundation. It is where you should put your money and where you want the other things that we're talking about to connect to it, so you
Yeah.
can drive better results.
Yes, absolutely. And, I think that part of what we're dealing with now is, remember that composable enterprise trend of the early 2020s, right? And that composable mindset assumed that best of breed apps could be stitched together after the fact. And I think what we're seeing now is organizations are sort of re-centralizing, if you will,
Mm,
around ERP as a system of integration to do a number of things, but one of those is to reduce integration debt.
mm.
And I think we talked about this when we launched the show. The ERP isn't more important because it's changed. It's more important because everything we're now trying to do sits on top of it.
Yeah. But the concern I have is that the companies need to understand what they need to do to execute ERP correctly with AI embedded in it.
Yeah,
Because the point is, there's a lot of unsuccessful AI journeys going on right now. And they, I would advise that you want to live inside the ERP with AI versus doing things on the side, because the fact is, those are going to be more siloed efforts. And the point is, you're trying to grow your company. And there's a lot of, I guess, data showing that the ROI of AI is not as successful as we thought it would be.
yeah,
And that's a whole different topic. But this is from Gartner. This is from, a lot of McKinsey and others that are talking about these things, that there's reasons why they're not successful. And there's because of the processes, because of the people, because of the data, because of the coordination of these efforts.
right,
So, you know, ERP is becoming more intelligent, and it's becoming more of a system of action. Do
right.
you think it's because of the employees or the business leaders or data or AI, or they haven't realized that this is more of an operational transformation that has to exist with all those components to be successful?
Well, I think that as with anything, Robert, some people get it and some people aren't yet there, right? And so I think that what we're seeing is a fundamental shift in an understanding of ERP, and shifting from what used to be sort of historical reporting to what is now, for best in breed companies, using an ERP for forward looking guidance, right?
Mhm.
And now I think, well, now ERP touches financial, operational, customer, supply chain, all of those decisions. And what ERP really is this single connected thread throughout historically disconnected systems that's kind of pulling everything together. And so I think that it's certainly an exciting time. I find it incredibly exciting time to be covering ERP. You and I've talked about this before. There aren't many of us who do,
Mhm.
and so I think that it is an exciting time for ERP vendors, for organizations who realize the importance of the modern ERP. And I think that think about what we've seen this last year. We've got Epicore's cognitive ERP positioning, and the agentic design layers of Agent Foundry, Lux, and that sort of thing.
Mm.
Got Google Cloud's agentic data cloud work. Both of these point to ERP and data platforms embedding recommendation and action, not just recording. And you've got SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, Infor, Epicor, and others, all of who've launched embedded AI copilot
Yep.
layers directly within core ERP models over the last 18 to 24 months, rather than as bolt-on tools. Is there a reason for that? Absolutely.
Yep.
ERP used to tell you what happened last quarter. Now it's telling you what to do next week.
Yep.
That's what every organization needs.
We're going to your point, Shelly, we're going to an event-driven system.
Yeah.
We're going from the past tense, like you said, what happened last month, to an event-driven where cross-selling happens automatically. Supply chain gives you flags of, like you talked about, things with tariffs and weather and things that are happening around the
Yeah.
world that could cause delays. There's a lot going on that needs to be in the system to help coordinate efforts to be more efficient. The goal is not to replace to the systems to replace people. The goal is for the systems to work with people better, where they're more strategic to
Right.
grow your business without adding personnel. So as we talk, Shelley, a little bit about the on-premise ERPs, which I think is a great topic, because the goal is for businesses as you grow is to be relevant. To always know your industry and to grow, and the systems to help you be more relevant and to use that system. And I think if you look at manufacturers or even distributors, their competitors, or some competitors, are for sure doing it. So how important do you think it is to modernize? And we can also classify, what does modernize mean? But
Right.
it's basically going from on-premise to the cloud to take advantage of the capabilities that we're talking about with AI and all the
Right.
automation options that are available. But what do you think? How important is it to modernize and to be more relevant? And then what type of suggestions do you have around that?
Well, I think, we've talked about this before, kind of most recently at the Epicor event.
Hmm.
And, in terms of modernizing, a lot of people view that as, shifting to the cloud and, moving away from legacy on-prem things. And, I do think that we'll see that more happening, but I think we're still in a phase where for a lot of organizations, on-prem makes sense, and that's okay.
Hmm.
So, I do think that when you think about the broader equation that so many organizations are dealing with today, everybody's laser focused on AI. And the question that people are asking is, how much value can we get from AI? And the reality of it is that without trusted data and processes, and the people who are a part of those processes, and the organizational change that's happening, and then the controls, all of which you can get inside your ERP. I think that is where people are understanding that we can't press the gas pedal on the AI success that we want to have without getting the rest of it right first. And it's really kind of a foundational thing.
Yeah, to that point, technology may drive transformation, but people drive the technology. So
Well, yeah, and we were talking about this, Robert, in the early days of digital transformation a decade plus ago, and technology alone is never the answer. It's the
sure.
people, the processes, and the technology. And I would say, truly, love to have your opinion on this. When you look at those three things, people, processes, technology, I actually think that the technology is the least important
Yeah,
part of that
it
equation.
is. Well, even to that, Shelley, companies are not using the technology as much as they should. So they'd be happy to understand the outcomes of probably last year's technology, how they could use it better, because they're getting new technology in these releases, but they're not using it accordingly.
Yeah.
And because they don't understand the playbook or how that's going to help their company, they'd be very happy to understand how to use it and help their business better, versus at the same time just getting new features and capabilities. They don't want to transform every year. They don't want to go through all these process changes and do all these things to hurt their business, not hurt their business, but disrupt their business. So the goal is, how do I use the technology that I currently have better? How does it reshape my processes? How does it make my company more efficient? That's what they're looking for. So if you introduce new technology, is that more key, or is it, how do I use the technology I currently have better? I think that's probably more important.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's important. And, I think that where people sometimes kind of get off track is thinking that, AI's biggest limitation isn't the model. It's the environment that it lives in. And so you've got to have clean, trusted, well-governed data and well-defined business rules. And, while AI can act quickly, it can also act quickly on bad information as much as it
Yeah,
can act on
that's the
good
scary part.
information, right? So the way that I think about this is that ERP is where the rules of business already live within your organization. So if
Absolutely.
you're not thinking about your ERP like that, or using your ERP like that, the time to do that is now. And so,
Yeah.
but again, the rule ERP is where the rules of business already live. And you've got your chart of accounts, you've got your approved hierarchies, you've got your entitlements, you've got your supplier terms, you've got compliance controls and pricing logic. Everything lives within your ERP. And that's kind of I think of that as like the scaffolding that AI agents need to operate safely and to make decisions that are contextually correct, not just statistically plausible.
Yes. Well, even to that point, a lot of companies, when you're going through a migration or a transformation and you're going to a new system or an upgrade,
Yeah,
there's 200 fields in a file master, and someone's like, well, why do we have to put all these in? There's a reason why they're there, because the the downstream of that is strategically put together for information, for reporting,
yeah,
for details that could affect supply chain or product production or whatever that master is calling out for. So while you're not filling it out or understanding what those fields mean, is a negative to the end result. So when you go to modernizing and talking about ERPs in the cloud, there's a reason why the companies want you there. First of all, the vendors all have industry specific systems, and you're getting industry specific from what a company has, a vendor has, but there's many other of your competitors or peers that are on the system that are contributing factors to features and capabilities that you could take advantage of that you don't have. So that's number
right,
one. Number two, it's time to modernize because it's change and it's an efficient change. It's giving you features that you'd never have, but you don't have to do this overnight. You can go 0 to 10 versus 0 to 100, because this is what I was talking about, to utilize the features and capabilities for the future and to be more relevant. But
right.
modernization is a scary thing at the same time because it's change, but there's nothing wrong, like you said, Shelly, to be on-prem. If that's where you think some of your structure needs to be, that does make sense to me. And
Yeah,
there's major compliance, things that occur. There's major issues with certain industries that, could be that legal hold, or it could be that there's certain regulations that you have to adhere to.
right.
But we all understand that. But at the same time, change can't hold you back, because change is one of the arts of the world that allows you to prosper.
Right. No, yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I think what I look for in vendor messaging is, again, many large enterprises are still, we know this, they're still running heavily customized on-prem ERP instances. SAP ECC, older Oracle e-business suite, that sort of thing. Some of these ERPs like predate the whole cloud transformation wave, right? And so yes, as we talked a minute ago, modernization and migration conversations are happening,
Yep.
and they should be happening. But what I'm looking for from a vendor is not, we need to move everything to the cloud and we need to do it right now. It's, I'm looking for vendors who say, we understand and recognize our customers aren't quite all there yet. And there are different reasons for that.
Yeah.
And so while that may be the ultimate goal, to migrate that part of business operations to the cloud, what we want to do is we want to be there with you on this journey, and we want to meet you where you are,
Yep.
and we're going to help you. We're going to act like a true partner, not just a vendor who's making a sale and moving on to the next sale, but we're going to be with you every step of the way on this journey and help you get to the place where on your own time. And I think
So,
that when I hear that kind of messaging from vendors, that's the kind of partner I personally would want to work with.
yep, I agree.
We heard that at the Epicor event. They absolutely have a timeline that, they would love their customers to be on, but the reality of it is they realize that everybody's not there yet. They're on a journey together, and they're going to walk alongside those customers and help them get to where they need to be in the time frame that works for them.
And it's about the customers. It
Yeah.
always is about the customers. So as we get to the kind of the end of our amazing podcast here in our inaugural one, let's talk a little bit about Acumatica, their acquisition of Vertrax. And this is a very interesting one because we've talked about this in the past, Shelly, that you build, you buy, or you partner. And this acquisition fits within the buy of them, which is a logical fit, I think. And so want to get your feedback on it, but Vertrax is they offer fuel, propane, lubricants, and convenience retail. That's their industry, their sector, but they're actually, I think, this gives Acumatica more industry experience, gives Vertrax customers really the legacy of Acumatica, the features, the capabilities, and the cloud infrastructure of the ERP of Acumatica. But at the same time, when you get more industry specific in different verticals, that this is going to allow Acumatica, it allows those customers to have those caveats that they couldn't have as far as the unit of measures or the compliancy or the different capabilities that they might not have had when it comes time to that. Because with that industry, they're probably bringing in bulk of the product, breaking it down in multiple unit of measures, and then putting that product together. And you need a system to be able to do that, and then converting that to maybe different types of metrics and I guess currencies at the same time. What's your thought on that? Because I know that you wrote something really well about this, and you have a pretty significant opinion.
Well, I think that, this is not Vertrax has spent years building Vertrax Energy on top of Acumatica, right?
Yep.
And so the thing that's interesting here is that this wasn't a stranger's technology that Acumatica, had to due diligence cold and all that sort of thing. This was a decades plus partnership. It had already stress tested this with real customers in production at scale, right? And so, this deal reads differently than a traditional ISV tuck-in, right? And so, as you said, Acumatica isn't buying a vertical from the outside, it's converting a proven partnership into full ownership. And, what I'm interested in watching moving forward is that they've made a big promise, right? This promise is continuity. Same product, same team, same customer relationship, pricing, contracts, no interruption. That's the correct message. It's also the hardest one to deliver, right? And so, the real test of this acquisition, in my mind, is not what we read in a press release or anything else. It's whether Vertrax customers truly can't tell the difference 18 months from now, except that perhaps their roadmap moved faster.
Yeah, we have to give it a little time. And I think it's a positive step for both companies. It gives, credibility to the existing customers of Vertrax. It gives more industry specific when Acumatica's customers want those capabilities. It's a win-win. And I think the industry specific as we go down this road, which is, by the way, nothing new. It's been industry specific. It's been around for a long time, but the emphasis is stronger on it, and it's the embedded AI is new, obviously. But we're going also to more of an event-driven system that's still going to take a couple of years. But once we're there, this will be a winner in a lot of respects. But it's how they put it together and the execution and how they treat their customers. I would think that at some point in time, they would want all their customers of Vertrax on the Acumatica version that has the capabilities built in. Because as we look ahead, and do you see ERP in the remaining system of record? Because I'm not sure that's the on-premise and that capability is going to stay the way it is, or to become more of a system of context, decisions, and execution. I'm assuming the answer is yes, but when do you think we'll get there?
Oh, Robert, I
So the
think,
easy question got hard now.
yeah, the easy question I think that it's, I think sooner rather than later. I don't think we're looking at 5 years by any measure, right? And I think that we're going to see more moves like the Acumatica Vertrex acquisition, and um, you know I think that this pattern is not new. We're seeing a lot of it, PE-backed platforms using, the balance sheet they have to buy vertical and adjacent capability outright, rather than, waiting for organic ecosystem development. And so I think that we're going to see broadly within the ERP world, we're going to see more acquisitions like this one that add capabilities, that add vertical strength and that sort of thing. And so, um, I think that this is a really interesting time. I've said that before. It's a really interesting time to be in the ERP space, as organizations and even the analyst community begin to realize how powerful ERPs are and will become.
It was well said, and I do think that we are going through one of the most exciting periods. I would say it's a evolution or a revolution of ERP. I would recommend the vendors to spend more on the modernization transformation efforts of
Yeah,
how they can playbook it with their customers to get them to what works for them, because it's about them, like you mentioned a
yeah.
few minutes ago, Shelly. It's how do I transform my business without feeling scared that it's going to disrupt us 100%, and actually we're going to go backwards and then we're going to abandon ship. So a lot of
Well,
companies,
and
well,
and the other part of that equation, Robert, is how can I do this and still manage my
yeah,
costs?
yep.
Right? And I think everybody's thinking about that. And so, and wasn't Epicor that did some really interesting things with pricing
Yep.
and some pricing guarantees? Like, I mean, that kind of messaging, I think, is what customers are looking for too. This is a scary time for us. Managing and controlling costs during an age of AI is a huge challenge.
It is.
And so vendors who understand that and who can bring pricing options to the table that make sense and all that sort of thing, I think make a huge difference in making this journey less onerous and less scary.
Yeah. And I think part of that is what I was kind of what I wanted to talk about was how do we have the transformation, the change, the playbook, the actual how I'm going to transform my business, the journey more successful, because there's programs and every vendor has it, but I don't think those programs are resonating is I guess is granular as they should. Meaning, like, how am I going to move all my data over? How am I going to change all my processes? And how does that look like? Because we are going to disrupt all your processes. So
Right.
I think that has to get to the front and center up front, because that's what I think is holding companies back
I
from.
agree.
Yeah, that's a big thing.
And sometimes it's so overwhelming, to think about all the things that need to happen, that sometimes the easier path is just to say, okay, we're going to deal with this later,
Go on
and
vacation, deal with it
and the
later.
reality of it is you really need to not delay dealing with this. And as I said, for my best guidance for someone thinking about ERP modernization is to, there are some great vendors out there. Look for the vendors who are going to meet you where you are
Yep,
on your journey and who
you have to.
bring those kind of playbooks to you and who make a commitment to be by your side and to walk this modernization journey with you. And they're out there. So I think that is my probably final and best advice.
Who's going to win on Sunday? Spain, Argentina?
I hate Argentina, so I'm, sorry for any Argentina fans, but yeah, España all the way.
All right, I'm taking Argentina. Robert Kramer, Shelly Kramer, K2 here. Thank you for joining. We'll see you next time.